Oh, welcome back, everyone. Hello, hello. Yes, good afternoon. Christopher Everett already in here. We are very, very excited about the next hour and a half. We have the wonderful Kate O'Donnell, and we're talking everything trans, lost in translation. So if you are watching and you've done this before, you know how it works. If you're a subscriber, you can ask questions in the comments box. No swearing, thank you very much. Oh, you'll be put on the naughty step. And if you're a non-subscriber, unfortunately, you can't ask questions. So subscribe and ask those questions. And as we go through, I will pick out those questions and bring them up. If it's your first time, then find the comments box. You can then make live comments. If you don't have your name as a subscriber, don't ask a question because we want to know who you are. So put your name on there. No anonymous here. No, no, no. That's not how it works. So we want to have a really nice open discussion about everything really on each of our sessions that we're holding here. I will say this at the beginning of every single session: please share the love. We are reaching some wonderful figures on our YouTube. Let me just give you an insight here. What have we done? Yes, so far we've done 173,000 minutes of view time, so that's nearly up to 3,000 hours of viewing, and this is only our 5th day, so that is absolutely outstanding. So please spread the word, spread the love, let everybody know about this. It is free and it's there for our wonderful community. Without further ado, I'm going to bring in the wonderful Kate O'Donnell. Let's hope she is there. Is she there? Yes. Hi. Welcome, welcome. Thank you so much for giving up the next hour and a half of your life.
It was a pleasure. It was any excuse to put on some mascara. This is only the second time I put mascara on in the last 3 months. So enjoy.
Where are you in the world at the moment?
Well, I ended up in lockdown with my partner, who is type 1 diabetic. So we had to kind of do quite a serious lockdown. And we came away for 4 days in the hills of Yorkshire, and we ended up in a pigsty, a lovely converted pigsty with no Wi-Fi for 4 days. And we've been here 3 months now. So let's see how we get on. I'm tethering all of this from my trusty phone.
Wonderful. Little advert there, iPhone. Come on, sponsor us, iPhone. Sponsor us. No, we'll take it. We'll take it. So a little bit about you. You're a performer, an activist, theatre maker. In 2016, I think it was, you founded Transcreative Arts Company. Is that right?
Yeah. So, yeah, for me, I'm 55. I know, it's amazing. And basically, I got to 50 and I made the decision to kind of come back to performing in theatre. And the main reason was I really didn't see any trans work on screen, on stage, because I'm more of a theatre background and performance, live performance. And I just didn't see myself. So I kind of took a chance and did this very small show called Big Girl's Blouse, which was the name that my dad used to call me. Charming. And in a very queer tradition, we take an insult and turn it into an award-winning show. Thanks. So I did that show, and it felt like, I know there have been other trans shows. We have been around for a very long time, but in terms of visibility and what I saw, I didn't see anything. And it felt like, who's going to book it? Is it going to get anywhere? And that was the kind of beginning, and it gathered momentum. And I was still working full time. So I used to do all my performing and creating during my holidays or at the weekend, so I could only take gigs for a limited period during the year, and I realized it kind of needed to grow. And so I took the step to give up work. I went part-time at first and then create Transcreative, and during that I actually got offered a part in a Shakespeare production playing Feste in Twelfth Night as a trans woman. So there was something going on 4 or 5 years ago. There was a lot in the air around trans interest. It kind of went from very little visibility. And I'm a real believer in, if you can't see yourself, you can't be yourself. I'm an absolute believer in that. And I think that's fueled a lot of my work. And we might talk about that later, about the Trans Arts Festival that I developed, because I'm not someone to pull up the ladder. I realized I was getting somewhere with performing and getting a platform together. So I very quickly realized there was a need to make the platform bigger and for everybody. So yeah, and it kind of haven't stopped since. I mean, this lockdown, the only good thing about it is I've had a chance to stop. I'm literally full-time trans. That's what I call myself. You know, it's very busy being trans in this world. And I think because I kind of jumped in, I've ended up having a kind of small role to play within our quite small community, but there's a lot of attention on our small community, and there's a lot of interest, and I think that's what fascinates me. This small minority has kind of exploded in the arts, and like everybody wants a bit of it. So I think it's really important that trans people keep a bit of it. Thank you, Yvette, saying I look amazing. Like I said, I had a bath.
I'll bring that up. So we've got a little bit of your journey into it as an actor, and there's lots that we want to touch on, but let's start by talking about Trans Vegas. Let's start there. Tell us about that.
Let's start positively. Because how those two met was quite different. You know, it's quite a far cry, you know, how we met, and we'll probably talk a bit about casting and issues within our showbiz world. But so very quickly, Transcreative, it wasn't just about me, and we needed to create a platform. And I think the name Trans Vegas says it all. I'm based in Manchester, so we set up, I think if you're thinking about setting up a trans arts festival, that's quite risky anyway, and put that in the north of England, I think there's our lovely poster for this year's digital Trans Vegas Arts Festival. So there's a real liveliness to the name Trans Vegas. And very quickly, over the last few years, we've tripled numbers. We decided as a mission in Manchester to kind of take over more prestigious buildings like the Royal Exchange, City Art Gallery, the Royal Northern College of Music, and place trans artists who don't normally get placed in those venues to kind of elevate the work, but also to increase the audience. So this year, of course, it's digital, and so that's challenged us all. But yeah, We've kind of managed to give a platform to over 300 trans artists in the last 3 years. And this year, digitally, there's going to be 35 artists. And weirdly, can you just go back to the poster?
Of course, yeah.
Very, very strangely, we put quite a few references in. We had to take out a reference. We had Trans Vegas, it's going to be a riot in it. We used The Trans Revolution Will Be Televised, which is a Gil Scott-Heron song about rioting in the 60s. In America, black, race riots. So there was this we wanted this year to be really political. And that poster was made quite a while ago. The program was made quite a while ago. But the language, we just knew we wanted it to be political, but we didn't realize how Black Lives Matter was going to impact on the festival. So normally a live festival, you can respond very quickly, but a lot of it was already in the work we do. And I think Trans Vegas and the work Transcreative does, I feel very lucky that we can broaden out the intersectionality of, I think people don't just get trans work, they get a broader view of our community, including like emphasis on young people, old people, people with disabilities, people of color, Black trans artists. So I think it's really going to find a place this year. And I think the funding we're hoping to get and the attention will be putting money back for Black artists. That's the plan, Black artists. So I feel lucky that we've got yet another platform. We're using our platform again. And digitally, like you said, it's very interesting. I think our numbers will increase because a lot of the trans community, they're quite exclusive. Theatres and a lot of performance spaces are quite exclusive to a lot of people, including trans people or people with disability, people from different ethnic backgrounds. So that there is an exclusivity that the internet doesn't have. So I'm really interested to see who accesses it and what we do with this digital experience, really.
Definitely. And what we've found is even with last week, we did 4 days. We didn't do Tuesday for Blackout Tuesday, and 4 days and already people are watching in America and Canada and South Africa, Philippines, India, Pakistan, all throughout Europe. So your reach, and it's that thing of also, I think that just on any of the sessions, feeling that you might be a bit embarrassed to actually go to a class that, you know, like that's probably out of your kind of comfort zone. Like if I looked in in Pineapple to do a hip hop class, I'd be like, oh, I don't think so, but I really want to do it, but I'm not sure. But I did it in my home the other day, and it was so freeing. It was wonderful that I did a hip hop class in my own home, and I think it's that.
Dance like no one is watching.
Oh yeah, oh absolutely.
Yeah,
I always dance like people are watching, Kate. But I think
that's really true. I think like when I started off, I was told very early on that people deselect from shows outside their welkin, outside their worlds, you know. And I heard very early on that people will probably deselect from your trans piece. So I always made my style is very accessible. The titles, you know, like Trans Vegas and stuff. There's already something I'm drawing on popular kind of stuff anyway. But and I took that on and I thought, oh, what, right? So people are going to deselect. So it's my job to bring in more people. And I marketed harder. I did more interviews, did this. And then I kind of thought, hang on a minute. If people are deselecting, if that's the tip of the iceberg, people are deselecting from a trans arts performance. You think if it was just that, you'd be like, well, maybe the world can live with that. People aren't going to see much trans art. Fair enough. But that is the tip of the, underneath that deselecting is people deselecting from giving trans people jobs, giving them homes, sleeping with them, having relationships with them. You know, it's massive. So I've really got this belief that this little tip that's visible in our platform, we have the opportunity, if more people came, it would undo some of the stuff that's under because I do believe it can create social change. I've seen it. Like there might be people who are watching this now who've never actually met or heard a trans person talk other than some BBC drama, or they've seen a clip or in the news or something negative, or they're being murdered, you know, if they're a black trans woman, or I feel like people don't get this experience. And I love being on stage. People are in the dark. I'm being very well lit. People are paid to come and see me, and they have to listen to me and all the people that I curate. It's quite a unique experience for trans people to have that platform. And so I really believe that we should be owning it. And I'm hoping that more people from around the world will tune into the festival and give it a go, you know, get involved. And they might be less likely to deselect, a bit like you with hip hop. They might feel a bit the same, like, oh, I've always fancied finding out a bit more about what, you know, and they'll get something nuanced.
I think also there's that, you know, what we hope, you know, from the Collective Creating Initiative, our hope is that that people broaden in terms of all aspects of them as a performer. So they broaden in terms of their skill set. And then we have that reach outside of the professional industry to people who come from certain areas, certain backgrounds that see that as something that they dream of doing, and we're actually able to offer that a taste of that dream where they can start to meet and to learn. And I think there are areas, you know, we're trying to keep the classes as diverse as possible in terms of, like, you know, this morning's been incredible. We did 101 in improv, voguing with Jason.
Brilliant, Jason. I love Jason.
Oh, wonderful. Now, Q&A with you, acting Jordan Lee Smith, and then Mary Birch is doing a mental health webinar. And so that's not one person watching all of that necessarily. People will dip in and out.
Yeah.
So part of that for us, and, you know, our engagement, which come on to it, like you mentioned, us meeting you, but, you know, like if there are people out there that are, you know, going through what, you know, people go through within the trans community, maybe they are who they are, have been at birth, and their lives are how their lives are, and they're in that sort of place of how do I make these steps, or they're going through it and they still feel alone. Like, what do you have? I know this sounds crazy, but, you know, do you have like tips. I don't even know if that's the right word.
Yeah, well, I think that's really interesting. I think for me, the visibility is the key. I think for my transition 20 years ago, and back then, I was kind of, in one of my shows, You've Changed, I talk about where I transitioned from Fred Astaire to Ginger Rogers during that show. I kind of start off as Fred Astaire, and then I get naked in the middle, have a conversation with my transgina. Lynn Gardner said it was the best bit of the show. Thank you. And then I end up as Ginger Rogers. And during that show, that's another bit of popularist. It's hard to sell a trans show, but you say, well, transition Fred Astaire to Ginger Rogers, you know. And I think the reason, the essence of that show and the kind of advice I give is I encourage other people to get on with it and do the research. So don't just be waiting for trans people to kind of catch up. And I try and empower trans people in that to not feel like, to get distracted by worrying about everybody else. Because I think when I transitioned 20 years ago, I really got sucked into worrying about my family, about the kids, about my work colleagues. And I kind of forgot to worry about me. And I think when you are transitioning, it's big. And the other thing I try and tell people to do is to be excited about it. Because 20 years ago, there was no shows that I went to see. There was no if there'd been a trans arts festival, a vibrant trans arts festival in Manchester, for me, that's where I transitioned. I think my transition would have just really sailed along. I'd have seen myself, I'd have felt this vibrant community, I'd have seen people have fun, are sexy, they've got lives beyond the headlines in the newspapers. So I think visibility has really, I think this is our golden era. I say it is our golden era. This is a time when more children, younger people are transitioning more than ever. You know, it's like it's happening. Yeah. And what I'm really excited about is we don't know what that's going to be like yet. We've never had this situation. I'm an Aquarian. I live in the future. I'm so excited. And I get surprised that people aren't excited. So whenever I'm being interviewed, you know, people always want the depressing, terrible story, and there are depressing. You know, there are figures out there you could quote all day long. Like I've had some of my gigs introduced. I'm about to go on stage, and I've had the statistics of trans people who kill themselves read out before I have to go on stage, and I'm like, okay, that's great. It's the sad trans narrative, and I kind of want to say to people, yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's embarrassing and awkward, but you've got to be excited about it, and it will change your life for the better. And, you know, society doesn't feel like that, but why can't we feel like that? And so I just tell people to be excited, you know. I wish somebody told me that. People were like, are you serious? It's a terrible idea. Don't do it. Whatever. Surgery. Oh, my God. It was all panic and fear. No one went, wow, that sounds amazing. Can I come on that ride? You know? Yeah. It's very cool. Trans people are just so cool. You should all get to know a trans person. As literally, you should end this call and just quickly find a trans person and just get to know them.
We've been talking to a lot of people in the industry who are obviously incredibly stressed and incredibly worried about, you know, this industry. And we've really said, you know, the future is yours to redefine. You know, we call it like a renaissance in terms of, you know, if you didn't like the way it was, then it's your chance to change it. And you can, and it's weird how over the last 3 months, this online thing has actually become quite liberating, and you know, and the way that you're able to touch so many lives and in so many people. I'm talking about just as a rule. It's actually really, I think it's really exciting, and I think, like you said, with Trans Vegas, awesome name by the way. I think you'll find that the responses you get are going to be outstanding, and they will be worldwide. They will be absolutely worldwide, you know. And so how's it looking? How different will it be to the real, to the live version? Like how's I mean, obviously it's in people's homes and things like that. Yeah. So
we've actually responded to a few things that have been going on during lockdown. So I think we've still got the vibrancy. This year it was always going to be political, so we're planning an online rally which is evolving still, and it kind of has an element of surprise to it. So sadly it was going to be our first trans rally in Manchester, through the streets of Manchester. We were going to have that. So I feel like there was definitely some elements missing. My comfort zone's completely missing. I can book people, get them a nice dressing room, get them on stage, be in the audience, sell tickets to a live event. Digital stuff, we've had to bring in, it's great, we've had to bring in a whole new digital team, of which we've sourced trans people to come and do that as well. And our digital strategist is trans, and our technical digital advisor is trans. But I think what it is going to have is this, there is some stuff that feels like it's going to be archive material. I feel like maybe sometimes we haven't recorded our work as well. And I feel like some of that will stay and be. And one thing we decided to do, because quite early on I was watching the television and I saw how our elder community, I was really touched by how they must feel, and how they must feel not valued, seeing themselves just being kind of in care homes, just kind of dying, and nobody really felt like nobody cared. So I thought, well, I'm going to do a piece with our trans legends, our trans icons. So I contacted 4 trans elders, icons, legends, and we had intergenerational conversations with them, and that wouldn't have come about. So that came about really quickly. And there's some really beautiful, I talked to April Ashley, who's 86, probably the UK's most famous trans woman, and we have some really interesting conversation with Campbell X, who's a filmmaker, and Meltz, who's a really young black academic, and just some other great talks. And I know they wouldn't have happened. I don't think those intergenerational things, and people kind of got on board with them quickly. People were available. I mean, you know, I've got
I think people are available. People are really like up for doing, you know, the people that are why I think this is going so well for us is people are available and they're really excited to do something. You know, it's people are really excited, and that's such a great thing.
Yeah. And the other thing some of them we kind of had to drop, but one, Justin Vivian Bond is quite she's kind of amazing there. They're a non-binary, legendary trans voice. And it was very exciting getting them over here. I've known them for years. And so we ended up creating a piece that's going to be a day in the life of, but it's so not a day in the life of. It's a very contrived day in the life of. But during that, Black Lives has happened in the middle of it. So there's been a complete response to that in the middle of it. So that's an interesting series of films. We've got a trans masculine art exhibition that we could just not have had. So international trans masculine artists who we could have never housed. I don't think we could have got in the room. I wouldn't have known how to stage a big art exhibition. It's usually months of planning, and it's very careful. So we've got this most amazing collection, which I think when we get back out in the real world, we can sell that as a collective. So I think that could happen. And also I think we've just introduced a load of new trans artists who people are. I'm very keen on getting northern trans artists. I mean, I'm not all over the north-south thing, but the south is okay for a lot of trans art, whereas the north feels a bit deprived. So there's some people you don't know, some people you do know. And I don't have to perform. I get to kind of do all the backstage and leave that platform for others, because I think that's really vital. I never wanted to be the face of trans. I am a face of the trans creative community, but I never wanted it to be me. And I think that's what can be a bit wrong with the industry. They latch on to one person or one story, and then you just see that repeated again and again. And I'm like the factory, get them through. Yeah. I put people on stage who've literally written one poem. We have open mic nights. We have trans open mic nights, because I'm like, this is the deal. Here's the microphone. Da-da. And yeah, they're just very vibrant, and you couldn't curate those. And who's going to give trans people that option? You know, some of the environments trans people are expected to go into are quite transphobic, or they're really hostile environments. I mean, showbiz, theatre, comedy, they can be difficult environments. They're relying on you being confident, being on your game, having loads of experience. I think if you're stepping out into that world, I think it's nice that people have this testing ground. And I've seen people really blossom and bloom, and that's the plan, really.
Brilliant. I'm going to go to Christopher. He's got a question. As well as acting, I work as a high school drama teacher in Manchester. I have several students, who are transgender. I teach inclusivity in the classroom, but I'm always looking to do more. Any tips?
I think inclusivity is really interesting to take a look back. I think just take a step back, you know, with how representation has been for other marginalized communities. And I always kind of talk a little bit about, and it's kind of easy because you could probably show films or read pieces that reflect it. I'm very interested in when people arrived on screen. There's this kind of theory that it took a long time for Black people to just arrive on screen. And if you go back to the 60s, Sidney Poitier in Look Who's Coming to Dinner, it was the shock of them. And then in the 80s, 90s, it was gay people. It was the shock of the gay person. They're always the plot twist. They were the drama. They couldn't just be the fabulous doctor or the lead. They had to kind of have this backstory. And I think that's where trans people are now. We are following in this legacy of not being allowed to arrive. And we also have to be murder victims, sex workers, drug addicts. Like if I look back at how Black actors arrived, there's the same roles, you know, and then gay people, it's the same. It has to end badly, which is still carrying on. So I think a reflection on representation is really interesting. It's really interesting around exclusivity. And also, I always ask people, when did they first see a trans person on TV, and what was it like? And what did you learn? Was it positive? Was it negative? What can we do to make that more positive? You know, so that's just some ideas. But they should tune into our festival. You should just send the kids the link. It's all pretty, I don't know if there's anything particularly, I don't know how old those, high school, they'll be fine.
As Sheila says, the more people who change the narrative and switch it from negative to possible, the more positive, the more all areas in the industry will shift. Great work you're doing. I also have come across trans youths in some of my creative workshops. We'll pass on your social media links. Fantastic.
Brilliant. And I think that is important, the positivity. I'm not Pollyanna, I do get that. But I think if I don't, it feels almost political to be positive or present positive artwork or performances or change the narrative. And I kind of like that. It's like, you know, Shit Creek. I don't know if you've seen that. It's on Netflix. It's brilliant. And they deliberately had no homophobia in that. Right. There's a gay couple in the middle of it. And I feel like a lot of my work is, and the stuff I'm writing, I refuse to put transphobia in it, just to see what happens if it doesn't. You know, how about we don't have that as the key thing? Why don't we have something else? You know, because there's enough transphobia in there. There's enough negative stuff being made out there by people who aren't trans, and it's so clear. Like when you see something, you read the title of something, and I literally go, this was written by a straight, white, cisgendered man, and I can tell you what's going to happen in it. I can literally do an outline of a film, because I get approached to consult, and I say, do they die at the end? Do they get killed? And they go, yeah. I go, well, I'm not that interested. There's your first note. See you in a bit, you know.
Oh, please do better. So moving on to like the casting world, because I think there's that side of it.
Come on.
So for us, something which is so exciting, we've come up with conversations last week about, I'm not sure, we used BAME as the title, but then again, you're talking about titles, and that's going to be a discussion with an actor coming up, talking about that and why they don't like that titling. Yeah. But the BAME community, now as a casting director, we'll put breakdowns out, and on the roles we will put, because everything we cast, we genuinely mean this, and is that all ethnicities, we are looking for all ethnicities for these roles. And the things that have come up are, I don't believe you, not us particularly, but I don't believe it. I don't believe that if a character's called Jane, that you would cast an Indian actor in that. So that's one. And we struggle sometimes to get BAME actors submitted from the agents or whatever for certain roles, and we're like, what is going on? And it's come to light that actually they think that that's potentially there's just box ticking, whereas we genuinely mean it. Now this is something that Rosie and I are going to look to take to Spotlight and to Equity and other institutions to say, okay, we need to forget the bigger picture, a little bit like you said, the smaller picture, the tiny details on how we can actually genuinely fulfill what we want to do, which is to have a cast that if you are great, that you are right for it. So I'm gonna go out on a limb to say I imagine that's trans communities that they may see a breakdown, and that it's not because it's not for a trans role that they're not feeling confident enough to put themselves forward for it, or their agent to put them forward for it. What do you think? What's your view on that?
I missed it. Is it you're talking about a non-trans role or a trans role?
Non-trans role.
The non-trans role.
A role for a male or a female. Let's use title. This is the role. This is a man. This is a woman.
Yeah.
We haven't said it's for a trans. Don't have to be trans. We just want to cast someone. I think we at that stage where people are potentially not brave enough to go, well, I'm that's where I am.
I think trans actors are going for lots of jobs, and I think the problem can be that we have quite set ideas about genders, and if it's going to be even about people's physicality and about their voice and about their appearance, and a lot of it, let's face it, can be about that. In this industry, it can be, and I've experienced this when I'm casting things. You kind of see somebody and you just feel like, I connect with them, and they kind of look how I imagined that character looking. I feel like trans actors are out there who are not out as trans actors. I know quite a few trans actors who are not out at all. So that creates another issue for them. Managing that, and about not being outed, and an element of, or not being out, just deciding and protecting that decision to not be out, and seeing it as totally irrelevant, and they're just a jobbing actor and they're doing very well, thank you. And if I look at them, I would say that they have passing privilege. So that is when you are not recognized as trans, you are kind of recognizing the gender that is associated with male or female. So I think those people probably have a bit of an easier time, because that aesthetic is, people are comfortable with that. They know what that is and that is. I have got a friend, I think I talked to you before, my friend Kate Kennedy, who is like 6'6" and was cast in the romantic lead in 12th Night. And I remember she said to me, I'm probably never going to be cast in a romantic lead again. I mean, she's a giant. I felt tiny. I mean, I'm 5'10", and I felt like, finally, I'm little. So I think it's not just trans people that have that. I think people's physicality, but I think trans people, often trans women can be quite tall, and often trans men can be a bit smaller than your average men. So there is this physical thing. But I do know actors that are just out there doing that. I think the problem might arise when trans actors don't feel they can squeeze into the massive gendered roles that we have. Like when you go and read for something, you very rarely find someone goes and reads something in a different gender or a trans. So I think I know a lot of trans actors that are either drawn to trans roles and trying to find their way through that particular experience, which we're probably going to come on to, or they're creating their own work or gravitating to supporting trans work and trying to find a way to have a trans voice, or they end up on a soap opera where there is the one trans character and you're never allowed to be anything but trans, or once the trans storylines dry up, they go, oh, they don't really need you now. It's like, it's really tricky. And I've got friends who are opera singers who are struggling, even though there's a massive history of trouser parts in opera. There is this narrowing. I think you're kind of, for actors to get parts, it's pretty tight anyway. Yeah. And you add in a whole load of intersectional stuff in there. And we know for a fact they get harder and harder, being Black, being older, being trans, having a disability. It's almost like people have to stop and think. They go, oh, right. Oh, God, what are we going to do with you? And you feel that. You do. Or the other thing is, you end up being the only trans person in that thing.
Now, we had this conversation, and it's very much about our casting is to kind of go, all right, we need, let's say we need a trans actor for that role because X, Y, and Z. But we always say, okay, great, that's amazing. But what about all these other roles? They can be trans as well, surely, if they are playing those roles, as long as they hit the brief for the role.
Yeah.
And it's always like of course. But it's almost like, isn't that part of this journey? Is just for it to be, we don't care, but this has to be. So don't worry. That's yes. Any ethnicity, trans, that's fine as long as it fits the narrative. Great, but this actor needs to be trans, and it's just we're so close to just breaking that. But is that something that
I think it all goes back to, and we are in the middle of this at the moment. Who has the power?
Yeah,
who has the power, and you can literally track everything back to that. If there was a trans writer, producer, director, casting it, whatever, if that was all trans, funny enough, there would be no issue with it. It would just be streaming along. Like I'm writing something at the minute with Krishna Ishra about the industry, which I'm really looking forward to. And we're having a lot of fun with it. It's comedy. And I was like, I just want everyone in it to be trans. Every single person, every actor, I want them to be trans. That is, I mean, I did it in a film. I made a film called Mum, an autobiographical film. And in that, there was a 9-year-old version of me, and there was a 20-odd-year-old version of me. And as the producer, I said, the only thing I want to happen is I want both those characters to be trans men. So I feel like it would be interesting. So I found a 9-year-old trans boy to play me when I was 9, who was brilliant. And then I found a trans actor who's now on Emmerdale, actually, to play me in my 20s. Both very handsome, thank you very much. That's the other good thing. When you're casting yourself, you make sure they're absolutely gorgeous. And I remember thinking, that was 5 years ago, and people going, oh, God, we can't find trans actors. I thought, oh, my God, I had them in my living room with pizza, with their parents, the kids, and I found them in my living room in Manchester. Like, are you serious? On a really £10,000 budget film. Like, I mean, and that leads us nicely, I think, into a little bit of a casting story, I would say. How we met.
Absolutely. And to sort of lead into this, and it's something that we come across all the time when we see in the news or in, let's say, the stage or on Twitter, on the Twitter sphere. And it comes down, and I think this covers the majority of minority groups, is that surely it's just acting, right? Surely it's just acting. Surely you're able to cast. I mean, I'll ask your view on it, but obviously that statement comes from a time where it was such a kind of, it was a much smaller industry, and when it just Britain was smaller in terms of even
people blacked up for parts. You mean?
Or you had people doing accents when now we can cast an Irish person or cast a Scouser, or and so it's a different time. So I mean, I have my view on it, but let's just take that statement. How do you feel when you hear people say, "Well, it's just acting, isn't it?"
Yeah, I think I understand where that is coming from, and I do listen to it, and I think it's I think where for me I struggle with it in terms of the trans stuff is that I think people kind of feel like trans women are men dressed as women. I think there is a belief out there, and I think that trans men are perhaps just tomboys. So they're just women who are a bit boyish. And I think when you cast Scarlett Johansson to play a trans man, I mean, we had Hilary Swank 20 years ago playing Boys Don't Cry, and they can act. And actually, like Eddie Redmayne, there is something, but it perpetrates. We're not saying they can't act. unless they can't act, but actors of that caliber can act. So there's never an argument with that, but it's deeper than that. And I think there is this belief, like a lot of trans women in particular, on Trans Day of, we have this awful day once a year where we have Trans Day of Remembrance, where we literally list all the people who've been killed around the world. And a lot of those are Black trans women. And a lot of them have been cited the defense that they attacked those women because they suddenly found out they were trans and they felt misled, and there was this thing. So it can actually lead to a lot of violence. It can lead to a lot of violence for trans women. It can also lead to a lot of violence for trans men, because people think that trans men should not be in your bathroom or having relationships they want to have because they're misleading people. So I think that's what gets missed. That's what gets missed. And weirdly, we reach a point where people understand that it's dangerous, actually. It's also really out of touch. I'm always really disappointed when a company or a film decides on the back of our history, Danish Girl, that was hard earned, that story on the back of trans history. Don't think to invest in giving that to a trans person. They give it to a cisgendered man. And I feel like a lot of the industry is creaming off our stories. I'm obsessed. Our tagline is telling our own stories. I am obsessed with trans people telling their own stories, because I have this theory. Can I tell you my theory of my industry pie? Brace yourself. So this is a baking metaphor. So we have a pie. The industry, if you think of the industry as a pie, Harvey Weinstein, the rest, with the film, showbiz industry, if you think of it as a pie, it's mainly eaten up by white cisgendered men. They seem to own the big chunk of the pie. There is some scraps left for others, but that's the chunk of the pie. So what trans people did, they turned around over here and they made this really cute, small trans pie over here. And they took it out of the oven. They were really pleased with themselves because, it felt quite new to make this pie. And they took the pie out. They left it on the side. They turned around for 5 minutes and they turned back. And the cisgendered white men had come and ate their pie. They'd eaten their pie. And that's what really does my head in. And I know Black people feel that with their stories. I know gay people feel that with their stories. There's you have to honor and respect that story and nurture that. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, name me 5 trans actors. Hard pushed. Name me 5 people who have played trans parts. Oh, well, we've had, it's quite easy to do. And I think you just have to look at those stats. And I really think we will look back at this time and hopefully be quite embarrassed that we were even arguing about this, that we hadn't thought. In a way, if they weren't making any trans stories, it would be fine. But these are Oscar-nominated, award-winning films, and nobody stopped to go. It'd be it's very like, I don't know. For me, it always relates. I look a lot to Black history because I think you have to look back to see how we're going to get on ahead, and you have to just look back at their relationship with the film industry to know how we're going to do there. And I always hope, can we learn? It would seem not. We are definitely in that minority. And what's really weird, we know it makes money. We know those stories are interesting. Yeah. We know they could be better. And we know that people want them. I am getting to the point where people, it's okay to keep consulting on things, but has nobody thought in a rather large corporation that exists on the television in this country to just go, we need, the National Theatre, why don't they just have a trans season?
Right. Just educate.
Why don't they do it and invest a load of money and go, there's no way we're going to get from A to B. We have to scrap this. They held, the National Theatre, God bless them, they held an open day for trans people to go along and audition. And that was the day that all the plays that were released that were going to be on that season were all written by white cisgendered men. So to be a Black trans person going for an audition that day, you must have been feeling pretty despondent. And, there are institutions that really could do more, because minorities like me, I can set up an arts festival on £15,000 and nearly kill myself, but it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. And there is this pressure on minority groups to be the one fighting and to do all the change. And we are too busy, too tired, under-resourced to create that change. And we've seen that. We have to look around Black Lives Matter. The work that needs to be done is white people need to do the work. We need to do the work. We need to wake up. And I feel like there is something about that in the around trans issues. It's like people are expecting us to sort it all out. And I feel quite lucky because I'm 55. I can make my own breaks, but I really feel for people who are young trans people who are coming into this industry or been in the industry for a while and want to come out maybe, or want to move ahead, haven't got the confidence to speak up. I've experienced transphobia while I've been in the rehearsal room, but I've been able to challenge it because I'm older and more experienced. But I do worry that people might put up with stuff and go for roles that aren't quite right, and not feel like they have a voice. It's a lot down to us. Like for me, with I'm really on one now. I feel like I'm just revving up now. So the way that we got to know each other was because I ended up in quite a high-profile trans casting situation. So a show was being made, and it was going to end up at the Donmar Warehouse via Galway Arts Festival. It was a film made called Breakfast on Pluto, which was Cillian Murphy originally played the film. Over 10 years ago or so. They decided to make it into a musical. Sounds really interesting. So this character at the centre of it is trans, called Pussy, and it's set against the Troubles in Ireland in the 1970s. So it's perfect. My family are Irish. I remember being really aware of all that situation, IRA bombings. It was amazing, and it was very prestigious, and the team that were around it had already been developed for a year. I'd just come out of doing Gypsy, my first musical in Manchester in January, where I got to play a stripper. Thank you. Loved it. And realised actually I did quite like musical theatre and quite fancied it. So I thought, I'll have another go. Maybe this is my new career. And I was up for a part, not Pussy, because Pussy is a very young trans female part. I got up for the part of the cisgendered mum, who is very transphobic, brilliantly transphobic, quite I don't know what the word is really. I knew that woman, and I also knew her backstory, and I had a lot of. I did a taped audition anyway, and I probably didn't play it the way they wanted it to. I played it in a way that was kind of understanding where that woman would come from, what it'd be like in the 1960s and 70s to have a child that was gender non-conforming, and how difficult that might be. And that's the last thing they need while the place is being blown up. I kind of got it. Anyway, I ended up on Skypes to New York, and it was all going on, and I ended up getting the part, and that was great. And then I kind of asked who was going to be playing the lead, just assuming that the trans female role would be played by somebody non-binary, trans female. I could think of 10 people who could have played that part. And I found out it was going to be played by a cisgendered, that means non-trans man. And I remember being on a very awkward call to New York with the director.
Okay, just a second.
Yeah.
Just go back, and you found out that it was being played by a cisgender, and then we lost you for 2 seconds. Just say that again.
So I found out that it was being played by this cisgendered man, and my heart sank. And the only thing I did say to the director was, and I was still on the call when I found this out, so it was live. I was talking to them in New York. They were setting up the new Harry Potter show there. It was, big stuff. And I remember going, are you ready for the backlash you're going to get? And they said no. And I said, oh, okay, well, thank you. Great. All that kind of thing. Got myself off the call, and I was like, oh no, I can't be in that show now. And it was a horrible process. It was a really horrible process, thinking I have to the trans person, this show, the center of it is a trans female character. A lot of time, money, and effort has gone into this. It's going to end up in the West End. So think that thought would be going on. But if you led them all back, they were all cisgendered men who'd written creative thinking. That there was it links back to that. There was some consultation, but I don't know what happened there. I thought that would be the thing you would question. They claimed they couldn't find the right person. So I had to kind of step out, and they were very understanding and respectful of that. I put one tweet up on my Twitter page. I don't have a massive Twitter following. And it just went massive, and it got kind of picked up by the press, and it became, I think, a very big story just before lockdown, actually, quite a big theatre story just before it all went dark. And I thought, yeah, actually, I am going to speak up, because I'm not going to, I think it needs saying. And I thought, actually, it might help other people. And I got masses of support, and a lot of I felt like I could leave with my integrity intact. But sadly, I really felt sad that the attention I was going to get was for leaving a show, for stepping down. So the cisgendered person never once in all that, and let's go back to being actors, not directors, not the powers, not the powerful players, because there is power in the rooms, not those, but the cisgendered actor, we felt really fine with that. And the trans actor, me, had to leave. And the sad thing is, if they'd have cast a trans non-binary person to play that role, that you could have sold it all day long. Imagine the trans lead, young trans lead, is challenged by their trans mother being played, as a cis character. I would get to be transphobic, outrageously vile to a trans character. It could have it was so brilliantly set up and so safe in a way. It felt like I'd have loved to have walked into a rehearsal studio and had another trans person there. I would have loved that. I think that would have been, that's quite unique when you place a trans person in a production. Often you're the trans person. People tiptoe around you, or they ask questions ad nausea, or they expect you to have all the answers for everything. So it was quite difficult, and I was quite down about it. But I just thought, well, it's systemic. That's a word that's being used a lot.
Yeah.
And we are in 2020 now, and I'm hoping that some of the language that has been used in the Me Too movement, in the Black Lives Matter movement, I draw on all that, and I have hope for that. I am a very hopeful person. Gandhi said, first of all, they will ignore you, then they will laugh at you, then they will fight you, and then you will win. I think we've been ignored, we've been laughed at, we've been fought. I think we're due for a win.
I think that absolutely. I think the thing about it is, and that comment, well, it's just acting, is just exactly that. All the conversations they're having around Black Lives Matter and what white privilege means, and so on and so forth. It is so relevant, and I think that we need. It's not even we cannot come out of this time and it to step back one step. It has to be, especially within the Black community, looking back at the history, like you said, that it repeats and repeats and repeats, and they talk about it all the time, and it has to be time that this is the last of it, and that we move on, and that racist, you need to be anti-racist, and that's the big thing, isn't it? You need to stand up and say, it's not just I say no, I'm not racist. It's you have to actually stand on the streets, which people are doing. And I think that you're right. I think that it's this time of reflection where we are, what's happening in the world, where we are isolated, that weirdly is allowing us to really check ourselves and really check into the conversations, and the trans community has to be one of those conversations, and that's why we contacted you, because it's everything that we feel. It's that thing of like, you should just be casting actors in all roles. When there's
if you were working on a production and somebody said, oh, as a trans actor, I can't be in your show now, and you are centering a trans character, so the whole show is centered around a trans character, and the one trans person who's going to join in the show goes, I can't be in it now, so, and these are the reasons, and they go, thank you, and then carry on making it. I mean, I find that, thank God I'm not relying on that for my career. And I can't rely on that for my career. So loads of like a lot of actors go by the by. There's some questions, aren't there? From
we'll come on to those in a second.
Yeah. So I was just thinking. I think you just have to. We have to kind of form, like Black people have. You kind of have to form your own creative movement. I think Transcreative should only be one organization. We need a lot more, but I kind of like the way it's going, and I like the fact people are drawn into it, and it's giving up. I mean, those platforms are incredible, and we've talked actually about you coming along and seeing those as opportunities to cast. And hopefully it's online, so we should be contacting casting agents and go, why don't you check out the Trans Vegas Festival? Because there's some incredible. I mean, there's somebody in there that should be Pussy. There's about 3 people, but there's one that, and I think as well, when I've talked to people about, if you are going to have these parts, it's like, how open are you? How open are you to them not being great singers, not being classically trained, not being like, I got the part in a Shakespeare play with Joe Davis, who's a brilliant director, and it was 12th night. I'd never studied Shakespeare. I didn't study it at school. I'm dyslexic, very hormonal most of the time. And what they did is they took a step back, and I worked with somebody from RADA who kind of, I worked with them for about a month or so. I spent a lot of time with them, and I remember crying because I felt suddenly like, why did no one teach me about Shakespeare? Because it's great. I felt like I had this fast track lesson, and Jo did that so I could walk into that room and hold my own a little bit, because she realized if she wanted a trans actor to play the fool, and be an out trans, so it needed to be the right person who could carry that, because I think it's the first time that had been done in an out way. Tamsin Greig had just played it as a lesbian at the National, and we were next up. And weirdly, Gâteau Le Chocolat played it again at the Globe. So there was a real interest in that play about gender is really interesting. And Jo was very committed. And I think there was a lot of trouble. I think there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes about, well, maybe we just won't have a trans person because it's getting too much hard work. And it was all feeling like awkward, and people were, but Jo pushed through, I think. And I think
that comes down to the pre-planning, doesn't it? I think it's that thing of, and I think this is where we have to ask for things to change. And that's if you're planning something, to have these conversations in terms of like, look into how difficult it is to actually find those performers before you commit to doing it. If you're not going to be able to put someone in a position that should be in those positions, then maybe think of something else to do. Like,
don't think of yourself as the norm. I think what we have the norm default, which is white, able-bodied, cisgendered, straight. That is the default. If you shift that default, then you're okay. If you're sticking to that default, we will always be other. We will always be the other. And we will be trying to fit in, or you'll be squeezing us in, or there'll be loads of trouble stuff behind the scenes that's going on. And you'll walk in knowing that. It won't have been set up in a way. So I think if you change the default, if the director is a Black trans man, I reckon that show would just tick along really nicely. But I've never really come across. It would, because the norm would be the norm would be different.
Absolutely. I'm going to go on to some questions here. We've got Olivia. Hi, Kate. Thank you for speaking about such an important topic. My question is, how do you keep connections within the arts theatre industry whilst transitioning? What a brilliant question.
How do you keep connections with the arts? I'm presuming they mean as a performer.
Yeah, I'd imagine like they're a performer and they're going through a transition, but how do they?
I think that's really interesting, and I think there are, just to let them know that there is, having said all that, there is actually a whole load of people who are woke, in the same way as Black Lives Matter, who have been creating spaces and opportunities for trans people. And I think if they're not creating them, we can put ourselves in that position. I would say turn up to the auditions, Just put your CV forward. Keep pushing yourself. Have chats with casting agents like yourself. I think we need to go and educate casting. Unfortunately, we do, you know, or there are some queer casting agents, like Queer House is a queer casting. I'm a member of Queer House. I think you just have to keep your connection, because if you started to disconnect too far, you'd be out so far. I think just see what's happening out there. Keep going for those auditions. Keep looking for opportunities. I would also kind of keep in touch with all the trans arts companies, the trans artists that are out there. Just kind of Google trans artists, you know, that are working. And I think sometimes we need inspiration ourselves, because I think it can feed us. We need to be fed, you know, while we're transitioning. And I think there's loads of stuff out there that's now on screen, in films, in theatre. It's out there, but sadly, I feel like it's on the fringes, and it's getting more and more sophisticated. The stuff that's on the fringe, people you'll see at Trans Vegas Festival, it's so sophisticated now. I don't think those are the people are ready for it. You know, those mainstream. I don't know if they're quite ready for it yet, what we bring. I think just really know that you have a point of view as a trans person. And my experiences this year, from having done Gypsy, being put in that spot, I got offered 3 musical parts. And I was told the reason I got them is because I didn't walk in, people like me didn't walk into auditions very often. They don't see people who have had our experiences. So I think our experience is key. People want that. People want that when you're casting.
I think certainly from all the casting director friends, and we're part of the CSA and we're part of the CDA, it's really interesting. We talk about this a lot. It's the casting directors are definitely the community that are helping to drive these conversations forward. Definitely, you know,
they need to, I think.
And I think we're, you know, it's part of a casting director's job is to challenge what they're being asked to do. You know, so we constantly present ideas to the production in terms of how about this, can we go this direction, and so on and so forth. So it's that's definitely happening within the casting community.
What do you think stops them? What do you think is still? What is still stopping them? I mean, because I'm always talking from my default, but it's really interesting. What happened
earlier on? I think it's what you said earlier on. You have to look right back at who's driving the conversation. Yeah. You know, we cast one of the most wonderful shows on the planet, which is Six the Musical, and that is not part of that conversation. That conversation is exactly what we're having now, and it's just wonderful to work on. It's so exhilarating and
really popular and really successful. So it's not like we haven't had examples of but I think theatre and art is about taking risks and about pushing the boundaries. You know, all the things that are now, like even things that turn up in quite big musicals and get very mainstream, they're really political, like Billy Elliot. It's a very political show about working class northern gender, about a boy becoming a dancer from the northeast of England during the family's miners' striking. You know, on paper, you think, oh, but that tackled an issue in a really. I don't mind commercial, and we are commercial. We know trans. What I would like to say to trans people, anyone trans people here, we are hot property. People want us, and we never should sell ourselves short ever. Really, people should pay us double because we get half the kids.
Absolutely. I love that. Octavia, hey Kate, my question is, will my acting experience to date as a male assigned at birth be invalid, not taken seriously when I come out fully and present as female in life and to the industry?
Well, Octavia, brilliant name. I think that's a really good question. I don't think any of it is wasted. For me, personally, I don't see one thing dying. I'm not in that belief that one thing dies and then you are reborn. I feel like I have been a young feminine boy. I lived as a gay man. I was a drag queen. So I'm from a very working class, poor family. Therefore I have male privilege. I'm white. I've experienced being gay, being trans, being a drag queen. I'm a recovering addict. I've been sober for 20 years. So I feel like all that as a character, I wouldn't leave any of that behind. That will all come with you. Everything you've done. And I think it's being brave enough to bring it with you rather than thinking, oh, I'm a woman now. You know, for me, I couldn't do that. So I made a show, Big Girls Blouse, where I explored all those aspects of me. And I reveal quite a lot about myself in my shows. I use my old male name sometimes. Some people decide not to do that because I think that takes away the shame for me. I think people want to go, oh, you're a woman now, and there is this spiky, whereas actually you're much more interesting and your experience is much more interesting to me as a creative. The fact that you've had those experiences, because very few people have had the experience of being born, assigned a gender, you know, at one part of their life and then move through. I think it's incredibly exciting. If only the world would see it as exciting. I think that question is asked because we are told that maybe the industry won't like it, or we're going to have to kind of hide some of ourselves. I mean, like people, when it happened to Caitlyn Jenner, this American athlete transitioning into, people really found a problem. Whereas I thought it was quite interesting. I thought, wow, there you go. I thought the world might go, oh, we're a bit more fluid and flexible, but actually they want to knuckle it down to Marilyn Monroe and, you know, Rambo or something. It's like it doesn't. Interesting, they're both white. And those binaries, and I think it's our job. Trans people came here to smash the binary for everybody. People think, you know, trans people over there doing their thing. They're trans. Like, no, we all have a gender. We all have a gender. And within all those genders, masculinity doesn't work. Femininity is, if you haven't seen anything about it, just go and look at Me Too. You know, masculinity, femininity, not working. Trans is the way forward. We're in a gender soup. We're all swimming around. And I think if you've had a trans experience, we were kind of a bit ahead of the game. So I'd say if you're not being taken seriously, it's not your fault. We've discussed that a lot here. It's because of the transphobia, the ignorance within the industry. But there are people like James and their agency, me, and a whole load of other people, even people who are having those trans open days, the national, they know something is up. You know, they know something is up. So I think you have to go in with that, knowing that you're going to be facing some kind of otherness, but not see yourself as other. You know, it's just that they happen to have set their default where they are. I don't think that's us. I think don't take it on. Just carry on. I don't think it'll be invalid. And I'm very interested to get in touch with me, and maybe you can come and do some stuff with Transcreative, you know, and feel like you're with your family and build some confidence with that, and then step out.
Love that. Amazing. Yvonne, Kate and James, very important topic, and hopefully acting industries, corporations will open their eyes and become more inclusively environment. Lucy says exactly, white cisgender heterosexual characters must stop being the default. It is in no way representative of real life. Here's one from Christopher. What is the funding situation like at the moment? Are you getting enough support from places like the Arts Council?
Well, the poor old Arts Council, I mean, they are bailing people out left, right and centre. And we are very lucky that we got some emergency arts funding. But sadly, this year was our first year where the festival hadn't been reliant. We decided, because we've been going for 3 years and you have to diversify your income. You know, you can't be reliant on the brilliant Arts Council, although we do fit in a lot with their what do they call it? Their strategy. You know, a lot of the work we do, I think really is housed in their Let's Create strategy. So we are a good fit, but we moved away from it this year, and we decided to be more. But of course, all that funding dried up. Literally, the coronavirus happened, and like £30,000 of our funding just disappeared. So we've been very lucky that the Arts Council have come back and bailed us out for a bit longer to do more digital work. So we're actually going to develop some of the work we've started. So I think it's going to be tough for everybody. I think the industry, as you probably talked about in here before, it's going to have to change. And maybe those theatres that are closing down, it's really sad. But I think we're creatives, so we don't always need a theatre a lot of minority work has not happened within theatres. It's kind of finding different platforms and different places and different audiences. I think we might connect with more people. I think theatres, I mean, when was the last time you could afford to go and see a show in London? Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's really difficult. So I don't really know what's going to happen to my industry. I'm very sad about it because I love live theatre, and I think the experience of seeing a trans person live, or a black person or a queer person live in a show, you actually get to meet them. You're in the same room as them, and I kind of love that. So I wouldn't feel like trans arts. I'm always surprised. I think some of it, if you give over some of the money to us and some of the power to us, I think it would be well spent. And I think that is the way the game might change, because money does make opportunities. You can pay more people and you can develop projects. I feel very much around the outskirts while creating this amazing trans space for 35 people. I did a project last year, the Royal Exchange, where it was called 100 Trans Voices. So I only had the theatre for one night, and I managed to get 100 trans voices in that space. Mm-hmm. And I think if you give me a bit of money, I could do a lot more with it. Than I'm good value for money. So if anyone's got money and you want to donate some money to us, please go to transcreative.uk, and we are creating a donation fund for Black trans artists currently. So yeah, which I think is another area of work that we've been working with a lot of Black trans artists, but they're going to be hardest hit. Trans people are going to be hardest hit. If you think about trans arts during the coronavirus, you think about which art forms are going to be hit, you can imagine what it's going to be like for trans artists.
Emma, hello. My ex-boyfriend is trans, and he's the reason I want to write my dissertation about trans representation in the creative industry. Any tips on how to approach respectfully and good resources?
That's great. I have literally, this summer has been the summer of trans issues in dissertations. I have spent a lot of time on Zooms. I think people are really happy to talk to you. How do you approach things respectfully? I would always say, place yourself in part of that gender soup. So I think saying, as a cisgendered person, do some research yourself, be interested, see some work that's going on. I think it's really also being open to change, because I'm working with someone at the moment who's cisgendered, who's creating a piece for the BBC, and I've challenged the title of their piece because I felt like it was setting up the trans person, and they've gone away and really reflected on that. So I think if you are going to be asking, I think you need to have your mind open and know your experience is cisgendered. So I think it's trying to not have such a rigid idea and maybe listen. I mean, the thing I keep hearing about Black Lives Matter is what do allies need to do? What do white people need to do? And we need to listen. So I would say the best way to respect someone is to listen. In terms of resources, I mean, what can I say? I mean, there's some brilliant books written out there now, written by trans authors. There's some brilliant, you've got the internet. I think you just type in trans artists, trans performers, and you've kind of got those. But I think how you approach it is really important. I think it's a really good question. I think do approach it, but just know that some of those people you're approaching might be quite tired of being put in that position, and they might question you and what is your intention and they might even ask, can they read it once you've written it, if you're using their quotes, which I'm not that bothered about that, but I've always been offered that. So I think that's another way to be quite respectful, is to really honor their experiences. And if they need to be anonymous, don't out them, obviously. But you'd be surprised how many people want to talk. And good luck.
Brilliant. Great question, Emma. We've got around 15 minutes left. So any questions, please type, because it's a slight delay on the questions. Christopher says, thank you for the answer. I feel it's especially important to educate, as we are a family starting to see more young people comfortable enough to come out as trans, hence you should get more funding. And Emma says, thank you so much. Where does, with regards to Trans Vegas, do you have any sort of dreams of is it something you only see in Manchester, or do you see? them sprouting up in all cities in the UK and Europe?
I think they've got real potential to be showcases for artists. I can see that because we have a lot of new artists and also new work. I think they've got real potential for festivals. I think there could be an arm that kind of goes off and has a Trans Vegas pop-up tent. So they kind of live outside of our little solo trans bubble. I think they could also be within LGBT festivals very clearly. So I think very straight mainstream festivals. I think that I could think like Latitude, Glastonbury. I can imagine there'd be, I think it's a way, I like the idea of taking that out. And I think there's a few organizations that I really love. People should look out for. Cocoa Butter, a collective of Black cabaret artists who we worked with last year, who created a trans cabaret evening. And I like their philosophy that they gather artists together. And they take artists on the road, but they're also nurturing these artists. And I see it as a real stepping stone. And I think we're doing some stuff online. We're doing some stuff, Make Trans Work, a series of digital workshops. Because I think there's not enough trans work being made. That's the other problem. And what's really interesting with trans, when you work with trans artists and writers, they never write about being trans. And they don't so much now. And I love that. It's about class, or it's about race, or it's about their childhoods, or their relationships, their sexual relationships. And I really see that as a real positive, that it's not like, the last show I made, You've Changed, I said I wasn't going to make another show like that again. I just didn't want to make another show. I made that so that people wouldn't keep asking me the same questions. I literally answered every question I could. I got naked. I had a conversation with my vagina. I literally spilled the beans on everything. And what I found is the Q&As after those shows, the questions were a lot better. You can tell, you're moving forward. Like these questions, people are like, there are trans people on here who are going off and working out how they're going to be in the industry. There are people on here who are educators who are checking out how to maybe further themselves. There are people writing dissertations. This was not happening 5 years ago. People were standing back and going, oh, what's that? I feel like people are getting their hands a bit dirty now and being willing to have those conversations. And I think this year I would have loved, sadly, Trans Vegas was going to be in the middle of Manchester, supported by City Council.
Yeah.
I was going to have a rally and we were going to be right in the middle of town. And I feel like that's our next step, is to broaden our demographic. So we step outside our community and make work for trans people, but it's good enough for everybody. Everybody can enjoy this. And I think it's a chance to, like I said, if more people get to see it, that tip of the iceberg can start to, very early on, we had a campaign called Stand By Your Trans, and we still sell our Stand By Your Trans t-shirts, available on transcreative.uk. And we had a choirs come on and sing a version of Stand By Your Man, change Stand By Your Trans. And I had a friend who I'd known for quite a while, knew me as a trans person, and they worked as an air steward. And the day after they saw the show, there was a trans person worked on their crew, and they'd kind of left them alone. And they decided to go and stand by them and have a conversation with them. And I think, great, that's the work I want to make. I want it to be that it breaks down those barriers so people can have a conversation, or feel like, rather than, oh God, I read this terrible thing about trans people where they're just dressing up like women and going into toilets and raping people, which is out there, by the way, or J.K. Rowling, chipping in. There's enough out there that you'd think we were just, if you just read that, you wouldn't get out of the house. So I kind of like it that people have a different experience. Like they come and meet you on our terms. Often we're kind of in charge. If you're the performers, or you've directed it, or you've written it, you get to come into our world, and people don't leave disappointed. They come back. We have a broad audience, but that's my hope, is to have it, bigger and part of mainstream culture, like Black festivals are. Like people really enjoy work by Black festivals, or there's some brilliant disabled poet groups. I like to go and hear about what they're up to. It's not like, oh, that's not for me. It's like, well, it kind of, if it's not for you, then there's something up with you.
Absolutely. Any part that you could play, TV, film, theatre, what would it be? I have one for you. So I think it should be the next M on James Bond. I think
I mean,
that
come
would be
on.
a role for you.
I reckon that would be a brilliant trans part, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
That
I
would be
think.
great. I like that. I do like that. I'm very, do you know, with casting, it's really funny actually. I don't have this big dream part that I want, but I'm always really excited where people place me. Like I've just been cast in an online production, which is going to be done half in Hungarian, half in English. I don't have to speak Hungarian, just saying. And it's the play Illusions, which is a Russian play. And it's really interesting about couples who are in their 80s who you realize it's a play about love, but not what you think is going to happen. And it's going to be played by 5 women, so it's an ensemble piece. So I get very excited when people approach me and they go, like being in Gypsy. Actually, I had always wanted to be in Gypsy. I've been obsessed with Gypsy because Gypsy is actually a trans story. It felt like my trans story. Like I grew up as a boy. I went to an all-boys school. I got to play girls' parts in the school plays, including the Virgin Mary. Thank you very much. And Gypsy, the little girl, she had to play the back of the cow, the boy, and then she transitioned into this beautiful stripper. So I have been obsessed with that song, the songs from that show. So when that came up, I mean, I'm in my 50s now, so I knew I wasn't going to get to play Gypsy or Mama. And it was like, I just thought, please let it be the strippers. Please let it be the strippers. So I feel like I'm really up for more musicals. And I think musicals they're so heightened and over the top. I think tweaking them a bit and placing a trans person in them, it's no bother. It's such a crazy world, musicals. I think it's one area that we can push it more. But I'm working on a show myself about being trans, called Trans and Irish. I'm very interested in my dad's experience of coming to Ireland in the 60s and what prejudice he experienced, and my experience of transphobia. I'm really interested in how they overlap. And also I think that will bring in a whole other male, cisgendered Irish community to join. I'm always very interested in how you can broaden out the trans narrative. You know, what I might learn something, and I already have actually, looking at how Irish people were treated, and you know, around that time is very similar to how trans people are treated. So
I think that just to sort of lead towards the end of this amazing 90 minutes is, I think that it's like we've constantly been talking about all the different subjects about why, you know, people, you have to go through what you have to go through. Black people, like in the stories, and LGBT, and then now trans, etc. And a lot is fear, isn't it? A lot of people fear it and fear what it is, whatever that means, and that it's. I think it's how we enter the root of where that comes from. Like,
yeah,
why should you be fearful of literally the color of somebody's skin? Why should you be fearful?
Because well, I mean, I know. I mean, I've been. I mean, that's quite easy to chart. I mean, there were people who literally claimed that they were inferior, and you know, and there's been hundreds of years of history of that. And I think the same in trans. The headlines
in trans community, it's like,
yeah, there is a lot of it because of press and media. We've been in the headlines. I mean, I interviewed April Ashley, who people don't know should look her up. She is 86 years old. She was very pioneering in the way she worked. She went to work in a brilliant club in Paris called La Carousel, was where a lot of trans men and women worked, and then went off to fund their surgeries and their lives and try and make a living. And in 1961, she was outed. So before then, she was just about to appear in a film with Bob Hope. She was a top Vogue model. She was their favorite underwear model. She was really interesting, from very working class background. In 1961, she was outed by a friend to the Sunday People for £5, which she's really annoyed about, that it was only £5. So she was outed, and from that day, she couldn't get any work. Her modelling contracts disappeared. She was spat on. She was attacked. the film stuff dried up. People would love her, meet her, and then when they found out about her, they would remove her. So that was in 1961, and she is still going. She holds her head up high, and the thing she says is, be kind, be beautiful inside, and you'll be beautiful outside, and be brave. Yeah. And she's still going. And she recently, I love this, last year was Vogue's 50th birthday, and they wanted to put her on the cover of Vogue. And I love this line. She's 86 now, so she's been, you know, she set up a whole brilliant thing. She wrote to trans people and lots of people for years until she realized they didn't send self-addressed envelopes, so she couldn't keep affording to write back. But, you know, when she didn't disappear, she said she dressed up really well and she turned up. But Vogue asked her to be on the cover of their 50th anniversary issue. It ended up being Judi Dench, actually, because they refused. Vogue don't pay people. She's 86, and when you're 86 and you've been trans all your life, you've not had many gigs. You are financially challenged. And she said to them, and I love this in the interview that I did the other day, she said, no fee, no me. And I love that she's 86 and she turned down Vogue. A bit like me turning down that people couldn't believe I turned down that West End show. And you're like, sometimes you've just got to, if we don't change and make, you know, some of the responsibility is ours and some of it's the world's, but we've got to start saying no to stuff, you know, and standing up for ourselves and just do that. So I love her for doing that. So she gave it.
I think a lot of the responsibility is on us.
Yeah.
Non-trans,
you know. It's actually on you, James. You didn't realize that today. It's actually all on you.
It is, you know, and we'll take that and we will.
You're responding to it. You're responding to it. You contacted me. You read those headlines. You were the only casting agent who contacted me. You know, actually that's not true. There probably were some others, but you've really nurtured that. You saw that as like, that is my responsibility. I am going to do something about that. I'm not here to exploit that. Like you're looking at what's the systemic stuff underneath. And I know that you and Rosie are doing that. And that's why I'm here today. And you're giving me a platform and I really appreciate that. And I know that you know your power. You are a casting agent. You know the power of a casting agent. And I know you're really keen. And I'd encourage people on here who are actors to get in touch with your agency, because I know you're genuinely, and when we see castings coming from your agency, you are doing the work. You are woke. You are interested, and you know that you haven't got all the answers, and you're looking to people to come up with them. And you're thinking of casting me in a James Bond film, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, I'll tell you, if it was ours, you would be in
the room.
I'm going to finish off with some these messages here. Lucy, thank you so much for your time. I really feel the musicals in particular are waking up to a lot more embracing and celebrating trans identity. There is still a lot of work to do, but there is hope. Anishia, I hope I've said that right. That's a huge shame. You would think if she was on the cover, it would get her more paying gigs, but I understand that. I think you would think that she would, yes, but it's because she was let down all those years ago by them. So the most important questions of all, forget everything else. What are you watching on telly at the moment? What are your box sets? What are you going crazy about?
Watching? You will, I mean, let me see. I watch Hollywood. People who haven't seen Hollywood on Netflix.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, I love a rewriting, a queering up and a blacking up of taking some small elements of Hollywood and changing that. I've loved that. What else have I enjoyed? Do you know what? I've started watching again, and I cannot. But I mean, it's so funny in the light of Black Lives Matter. I happened upon an episode of The Vicar of Dibley, and it's so, their world is so white, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't even exist, that world. Richard Curtis's world never really existed, did it? But somehow that's what we got to believe, you know. So I kind of got sucked in, and I'm really like getting sucked in, going, no, don't get sucked into that. So I would recommend Hollywood for sure. If you want to see something done well, anything done by the Ryan Murphy crew, the Janet Mock, they got a black trans producer working on that. You know, the same people who made Pose, The Killing of Versace, you know, they're Glee, I think. They're coming American TV. They're kind of really. Then I've got pulled in some really dark stuff around. I don't know. There's always something dark on. My partner can't believe I can go quite dark. You know, is it Jeremy Epstein? I got quite drawn into the whole Jeremy Epstein.
Oh my gosh, I started watching that the other night. let's not go.
I got a bit. Oh my God! There's an amazing film, The Portrait. The two films I would recommend. A brilliant. It's a French director. I've started to watch. She made a film called Tomboy, which is so nuanced. I've talked to a lot of my trans friends about it. She made it about 10 years ago, and she's made a portrait of a woman on fire. Portrait of a lady on fire.
Right.
Beautiful, like avoiding the male gaze in the portrait of a lady, and really nuanced handling of gender in those two. She's an amazing French director. I haven't got a name, but those two are really worth checking out.
Brilliant. Books? What about
Trans-Vegas? Trans-Vegas, it's on 19th to the 21st of June, online.
I will bring this in. There we are.
Transcreative. If we get the can we get the transcreative.uk up? We need to get that up at some point.
Let me try and do that. Bear with me 1 second. Let me just.
We're really looking forward to how people respond to the work we've made.
Let me see if I can bring this up. This is the website here. So let's go to your. There you go. Go and find Transcreative, and you've got all the information there about that. So Transcreative, and that's find that on your the faculty section as well. So where we've put all that in, you can go under there and see you. Okay, absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful to chat with you here, and I know you'll see all the thanks come in here, how much people appreciate it. So I'm gonna, if you go in a minute, just hang about, I'll take you off screen and just do the thank you goodbye. But from me and Rosie, thank you, and from everyone watching,
thank you. It's lovely. It's lovely working with you.
Oh, see you in a second. Amazing. Well, that was the sensational Kate O'Donnell talking everything there, Lost in Translation, which I hope you've enjoyed. It's been an incredible 90 minutes here for us. All these streams will live on our YouTube channel for a month. So if there were things that you missed because you came in later into the conversation, you can go back and rewatch that. Please share the Collective Creative Initiative. 30 hours a week, we're all free for you guys, and we've got acting classes, Q&As, music, dance. Later today we have the wonderful Mary Birch doing a mental health webinar. Coming up also is Jordan Lee, who's doing a whole Act Muso session. So there's just all sorts that we've got going on each week for the next 6 months, and it's free for you. So please share. Follow us on Twitter, which is CCI 2020, and then on Instagram we are Collective Creative Initiative. And that's it. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you again to the wonderful Kate O'Donnell. We will see you a bit later. Bye-bye.